Good morning, everybody. It was a nice introduction, a little bit humbling, to be sure. One thing that was not mentioned was my nationality. You mentioned that I'm teaching at Antwerp Management School, and I live in Belgium, but I'm not Belgian. You mentioned London Business School, and I think you can guess that I'm not British. Yeah. Do you know my nationality? What is it, South African? This is what has started happening to me recently, because I'm actually Australian, but I'm married to a Dutch-speaking woman, and I suddenly start sounding Afrikaans, which is terribly embarrassing, you know. So I'm not South African, I'm Australian. It's very nice to be here, and it was nice to meet a lot of you last night, and I had some great conversations. And one of the things that I said last night, or talked about last night with some of the people I met, was that I've kind of played on both sides of the educational world, if you like. I started my career in higher education back in the late 1990s, initially working in kind of the administrative side of the business school world, and then through continuing my studies, I eventually became a professor. So what I'm going to talk about a little bit today is, well, I guess my experience in playing, on both sides of that world. I know when you look at me, you think, that guy doesn't look like a professor. Anyone thinking that? No, no, because I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with a guy, and he said, no, you really don't look like a professor. He said, because most professors, their body is just there to carry their heads around. And he said, you look reasonably fit. And I said, oh, okay, thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. Okay, so what are we going to talk about? I mean, we've been here talking really a lot about technology. And, given my, I guess, more than 20 years now in the world of higher education, of course, I've been part and have observed this digital transformation that the sector has been going through. But increasingly, I've come to believe it's not about technology, actually. The issues that we face in thinking about developments like big data and analytics and mobility and social, it's not fundamentally an issue of technology. I think what it is much more about is an issue of creativity. And in particular, the way that we think. And that's really what I want to talk about this morning. I'm not going to put technology aside for a moment. What I really want to talk about is the way that we think. And what I want to explore, actually, is how can we start to think a little less linear? How can we start thinking a little bit more transformationally as individuals? So this talk is not going to be about me or about the education sector. It's actually going to be about you. Is that exciting for you? Are you now shivering with anticipation? Because I'm also a little bit suspicious, because there's only one person in the front row, because you've seen me speak before, and you know that stuff flies out sometimes. Is that why you cleared the seats here? All right, so if I do hit anyone in the front, well, there's only one guy. If I do hit you, it's easy, you're not listening. If anything flies out, don't take it personally, all right? You can move if you want. You're okay there? All right, good, all right. So here's what I want you to do. We've given you a piece of paper, and the piece of paper has circles on it. The piece of paper looks like that. What I would like you to do now, please, is fill out all of those circles. You have 2 minutes. Your time starts now. Please fill out all the circles. Let's go. Now, if you don't have a pen, do it in your head. Let's go. Come on, time is ticking. You're doing it in your head? All right, good. Has anybody finished already? Great, wonderful, quite a few people. If you have finished, you can have a glimpse over and see how other people are doing it. If you have finished, you can check your mail, make a call. People still going frantically? You've got 30 seconds to go. Who's finished now? Almost everybody. Good. Who is still drawing? Please raise your hand if you're still drawing. All right, these people are a bit special. Have a look at them. Keep going. Okay, so what I've actually just given you is a psychological exercise. And the exercise is on your cognitive preference when faced with a complex or ambiguous task. So as human beings, when we're faced with complexity or ambiguity, our brains can tend to work in very different ways. One of the ways our brain can work is actually to try to jump to simplicity, to certainty, to linearity. And what the psychologists call this is convergent thinking. So we very quickly narrow to a particular simplified approach. So if on your paper you took one line and just filled out all the circles like that, did anyone do that? Very linear. This is about as far from creative thinking as you can get. You know, you just simplified it. Or if you just went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, or you did a row of smiley faces and a second row of numbers. What we typically see here is that for adults, like us, about 80% of people do this exercise in a very linear way. We don't think creatively. And the opposite, of course, to linear or convergent thinking is divergent thinking. It's open-mindedness. Now, why is this important? Because when you start to talk about non-linear evolutions in terms of technology, in terms of behaviors, this becomes very problematic because our brain is locked into simplification, linearity, and it finds it very, very difficult actually to cope and to think in a non-linear way. Now, raise your hand in this room if you have children between the ages of 4 and 7. Anyone around this age? Okay. Give this exercise to your kid. What's your name, sir, with the beard? James. James. Okay, James. Yeah. So, James, how old is your child? 7. Boy or girl? Girl. What's her name? Georgia. Okay. Give this exercise to Georgia, and I almost guarantee you will see something like this. If my clicker will work. Oh, too far. Go back. It's going a bit slow. No, it's coming. Now, there's that one. Huh? Something weird is happening. That's very, very linear. All right, I'll go back. I'll come back this one. I'll just leave it blank for now. Something happened wrong with the slide. Okay, so what we will see with Georgia is if you give it this exercise, and what I have in the presentation, is the exercise when I gave it to my daughter. My daughter's now 11. I gave it to her 3 years ago when she was 8. And what you'll see in the way that... yeah, there you go. So that's what you see. This was Hannah's. If you give it to Georgia, you'll see pretty much the same thing. Why? Because a child's brain has not become linear yet. And what we know is that between the ages of like 0 and 7, sort of George's age, the brain is by default imaginative. It's divergent. So from 0 to 7, 98% of children think in this creative or divergent way. What then happens is quite scary, because between the ages of 7 and 12 years old, the ability for divergent imaginative thinking collapses. So George is kind of on the edge of the abyss, if you like. Don't feel bad, you know. Don't feel bad. I'll talk to you about some other stuff related to parenting later. So by the age of 12, 40% of children still think in this divergent or creative way. Between 12 and 18, this ability for true imaginative divergent thinking collapses even further, and we're down to around 10% of kids. Now, you know this from your own experience, because how many of your friends still wanted to be an artist, a dancer, a musician at the age of 18? It's maybe 1 in 10. What then happens is even scarier, because between the ages of 18 and somewhere in our mid-30s, this ability almost disappears. So by the time we're in our mid-30s, only about 2% of a given population of adults will think creatively, divergently. The rest of us tend to go linear. Right? Now, why does this matter? It matters in a non-linear world, because when you're facing this VUCA stuff, which I'm sure you've heard about, you know, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, we need to step back and think differently. Right? So the first thing we actually need to be able to do is what the psychologists call metacognition. You see, when I gave you that exercise, the circles exercise, what did nobody ask me? When I said fill out the circles, what did nobody say? Yeah. Why? Why? How? You know? What we did was we just acted automatically, almost like robots. So the first thing we need to be able to do is identify complex or ambiguous situations. If we see a new technology emerging, if we see a new behavior emerging in terms of social dynamics of millennials, we need to step back and think about the way we're thinking about that. And what we need to be able to do is actually identify when we fall into patterns of behavior. Now, this is not easy, however, and I want to show you a little story to explain how difficult this can be. So this is a guy, Doug Dietz, and I met him about 6 years ago, and he's an engineer. He was working for a company called GE, and this was the business he was heading. It was the MRI Scanning division. Now, this is a business which, when Doug Dietz came into it, was a very established business and established technology. But what Doug Dietz was shocked by was his experience when he went out to visit hospitals who were using this technology. Now, what he wasn't shocked by was the use of this for adults, because, you know, as adults... Has anyone been in a machine like this? Raise your hand. Okay. You know the experience. You go into the room, it's sort of dim, you lie on the bed, you get scanned. It's not fun. What about for little Georgia? What about for a 7-year-old child who's never been to a hospital before? He's led into a dimly lit room, left alone to lie still on a humming machine that's going to swallow her up. How's Georgia going to feel? It'll be interesting. She's going to be afraid. So this was a real problem, because the experience that Doug Dietz was witnessing was that the doctors had turned to the engineers at GE and said, we need a solution for a wiggling Georgia. This little kid won't lie still. We need to make her lie still. What's the engineering solution to a wiggling child? Strap them down. Are you trained engineers or what? It's obvious. You strap them down like that. So that was what they'd done. They'd fitted constraints to these things. Now, of course, it doesn't work. Because I've got 3 kids. They just, even if they will move. So the doctors had turned to the other people in the hospital who are very good at making people lie still. Julian, who are those people? The anesthesiologists. Is that how you say it? I'm Australian. English is my second language. You know, I get them mixed up sometimes. And yeah, the anaesthetist people. So they knock the kids out. So if you went to hospitals in Canada, the US, Australia, for children under the age of 6, they were anaesthetizing around 40% of them for this kind of this is great. Right, what I'd like you to do now is turn to the person next to you and come up with a creative solution to this problem. I'll give you 1 minute. Go. So what do you think?
Something interesting to look at.
Yeah.
With a reward at the end, but I can't find
Right.
out the motivation.
So rewards at the end. It's got to be a reward. So you can gamify it in some way, so that they lie still, and if they move, they lose a point. If they, something like that. Okay. Very, very good. Yeah. Good. What would you do?
We want a game where if the child wriggles, then they lose points, but if they stay stock still, they get mega points.
Superb. So you gamify it, you get a prize at the end, the kids are going to have an objective. Excellent. What about you guys? What did you do? Same thing, gamification? Good, good, good. Excellent. Good. All right. Thank you. Good. Okay, so we talked about gamification. Kids love games. And in fact, they can very easily put a little sensor on the bed so that if the kid moves, they lose a point. So we can gamify. What else might we do? What do people talk about? Rewards. Well, of course, gamify it with the objective of a reward at the end. Stories. Stories. I have 3 children. My little boy Charlie's 8. He's obsessed with Star Wars. If that machine looked like, you know, a Star Wars ship, and he walked in and the doctor was dressed as Darth Vader, you know, the doctor would just say, lie on the bed. You know, it would be fantastic. So you can think, okay, we make a story out of it, and definitely we change the look of this thing. It was very interesting. When I showed my little boy, he said, it looks like an octopus. He said, that's the mouth, and it's going to eat you. Strange. So you maybe want to change the look and feel. What else do we want to do? What else could we do? So gamification, change the look, explain it. And in fact, I'll show you what they did in a moment, but that's very important. You've got to explain to the child what's about to happen. But maybe you also fantasize that story. that they're going into an experience here, yeah? The music, so this is a whole activity cycle. And of course, that's eventually what GE did, and this is now, GE is a whole business, a consultancy business now, around childhood experience in hospitals. Now you see, I mean, some of you might know this. Does anyone already know this case study? It's talked about a lot in the innovation world. It's celebrated as an amazing case study in innovation. I think it's pretty pathetic, actually. How long did it take them to come up with this solution? 20 years! For 20 years, they were strapping little kids like Georgie, on the bed. And this is not a success story. This is really sad. Now, why is that? Because this is a story of very, very intelligent people, right? Who are the most intelligent people in the world? Professors. I used to be one. That's what they think. I mean, professors often are the most self-centered, egotistical, narrow-minded little people you're ever going to meet. Because they live... I was one. All right, okay, I know. I was one of them. I'm a part-time professor now, all right? Because they're very narrow. Because they spend a large part of their life learning more and more about less and less until they know everything about almost nothing. Very small. So this is also what we sometimes confuse. We sometimes confuse IQ with the ability to think. Two different things, especially when we talk about creative thinking. That's that 2%. That's the linear. Because the more we specialize as we age, often the more we frame problems through a single lens, our own specialized lens. And that's part of the problem here. The engineers were looking at this as an engineering solution. The doctors were looking at it as a medical problem. What was the real problem? It was fear. It's a psychology problem. Right? So this is also very important, because what we have to accept and we have to be open to is humility. We have to be open that maybe our narrow view of the world is not the only view of the world, and we have to be open to that. And I'll talk more about this in a moment. So there's several steps to this. And in fact, the thing that I did enjoy about Doug Dietz' talk was he talked about his mind and the way it worked. And what he talked about actually was sort of the steps to getting to a creative approach. And the first thing, of course, is when you're facing a change, a new technology or a complex problem, you've got to ask yourself, what is the real problem here? You all know it. Is the real issue with getting technology adopted in higher education institutions the technology? No, the issue is change management. It's convincing people who've been doing things in a very linear way for a very long period of time to think about it doing it differently. The other thing here is once you've rethought and looked at the thing from different angles, you've then got to generate a lot of ideas. Now, you see what we did in this room. In this room, within 2 minutes, we probably generated 100 ideas on how to solve this problem. So that's also important. Before jumping too quickly to the single line approach, to just doing what we've done in the past a little bit better, step back and say, well, how else can we do it? I often walk into organizations and they say, we don't have the resources. Can't be done. I say, well, hang on a moment. Do we not have the resources, or do we not have the resourcefulness? That's what liquidity is about. Thinking about different ways to do things. Now, once you do that, you can be a little bit flexible. And that's what you started to think about, because you said, well, actually, let's stop thinking about the technology. Let's start thinking about the story, the training of the staff, the whole experience. So you look at it from a different angle. That then can lead to redefinition, and what that then can lead to is something new. But also, this is not really new. Who do you think Doug Dietz went out and benchmarked to come up with this concept? Do you think he went to Siemens and Toshiba? Who do you go to if you want to learn about how to really delight kids with experience? Who do you go to? Disney! Go to Disneyland! Visit the folks at Lego! They're the people you go to. So this is also, again, about having this comfort to step out of our domain of expertise. Okay? Now, of course, let's look at this. This is my world. This is the business school world I've worked in. Have a look at that. That's a classroom from 1950. Have a look at this one. 1970. What's changed? He's got a pretty cool tie. You see that tie? You could land a plane on that thing. Look at it. It's really, really funky. The weird thing is, I used to work with some guys at London Business School who still had the same suit. 20 years later. That's good. Okay, now let's jump forward. Let's get radical. Whoa. Whoa. Well, these are the people we're working with. These are the people we're working with. The people who think it's pretty radical to start using an overhead projector. Who think it's pretty radical now to move into, integrating tablets in some way in the classroom. These people think in a very linear way. So what we've got to do is try to help people. We've got to try to really inspire people to be non-linear. Now, how do we do that? We've got to overcome some issues. And I'm going to give you the answer now. Are you ready? This is going to be this is going to like move your world in a way you haven't been moved for a long time. You're never going to forget. Are you ready? That's the answer. This is the answer. It's not the kind of cake you buy in Amsterdam. I know what you were thinking. No. All right, so here we go. What I'd like you to do now, you ready? I want you to take your paper, turn it over, take your notepad, and here's what I want you to do. I want you to draw a cake, and I want you to cut the cake 4 times. Draw the cake, cut it 4 times. Your objective is to come up with the maximum number of pieces of cake, and you have 30 seconds. Go! Draw the cake, cut it 4 times. Maximum number of pieces. You have 20 seconds to go. Done? 10 seconds to go. Raise your hand if you're finished. Okay, please stop. Put down your pens. Please raise your hand if you drew a cake that looked like that. Disaster. What have we just been talking about? 20 minutes. What have we been talking about? Think creatively. Don't converge. Imagine. This is like a robot. Terrible. What about you did one like this? Ooh, offset cuts. Equally pathetic. What about this one? Ooh. Now, look, don't think I'm arrogant, right? Look, remember what I said? I spent like 20 years of my life becoming one of those narrow people, a professor. Yeah? And when I did, these exercises I'm sharing with you, when I did them the first time, this is what I did. I got with the cake exercise. And I was really pleased with myself. And then my colleague, the psychologist who gave it to me, do you know what she said? Loser. She laughed at me. Said, hopeless. And I was like, what?
You didn't understand the question.
Are you blaming me? I'm sorry, what's your name? What's your name? What is your name? Heidi. Heidi, grow up. I'll come to that in a moment. No, it's very funny because, look, okay, now some of you might have done that. Ooh! 3-dimensional. Very suboptimal. It's amazing, right? Now, what's this about? Okay, give this to little Georgia. Again, little girl, go give the exercise. She's going to think differently. Look, who has kids here? Raise your hand who has children. They're wonderful to experiment on, No, seriously, like most people when they have birthday parties, they hire a jumping castle and play pass the parcel. I do psychological tests on the kids. You've got a control group, you can do it. That was really good. I gave this exercise to my kids, and it's amazing. Who do you think did the best? I gave it to them 2 years ago. Charlie was 6, Hannah was 9, Reese was 11. Who did the best? Charlie, by far, by far. And by the way, when he came with his little cake, what do you think the older brother Reese said? That's not allowed. Heidi, yes? I'll come back to that one. Oh, no, you see, here's the thing. Here's the thing. You see, because little Charlie, he hasn't got what we've got. He's not making assumptions. What assumptions did we... I did the same, right? When I did this exercise for the first time 3 years ago. What assumptions did we make about this exercise? Straight cuts, straight lines. What other assumptions did we make? The cake is round. You can't move the pieces. I was in Sweden. I gave a talk for Swedbank about a month ago. The Swedes always do it top left. Because everyone gets the same size piece in Sweden. Yeah? do this in America, you see a little bit of a different result, of course, you know, Donald Trump. Okay, he gets the big bit. You know, so we make these assumptions. All right, come on, keep going. What other assumptions did you make? Because we didn't just make assumptions about the cake being round, the lines being straight, equal-sized pieces. We also made a big assumption about the device, the knife. What assumption did we make about the knife? One blade. This is digital, isn't it? You know, so many times I walk into organizations, you know, higher education organizations, and what are we trying to do? We're trying to go from 8 pieces of cake to 10 pieces of cake with digital. But what do we... That's not how the folks at Uber and Spotify think. They think, how do we go from 8 to exponential? You see? So this is tough. It's really, really tough. So another assumption we made. It was interesting when I watched you work. Because I said, go! What did you all do? And I saw somebody look over at someone else. And they went like this. You assumed it was an individual exercise. And look around. So many people finished quickly because they assume there's one right answer. There is no one right answer here. Now, if you threw away all those assumptions, like Charlie did, what's possible? Now, even if you take a round cake, what about if you do one cut like this? Continuously, as a zigzag. And then you do the second cut on the vertical. How many pieces do you think you can come up with? In 30 seconds? Thousands. In fact, little Charlie, when he came to me, he said, sorry, Dad, you know, sorry, Papa, I can't count. It's too many. He got it. All right, so, turn to the person next to you now. Why is it that Charlie thinks different to us? My little boy, when he gave this exercise, 6 years old, why is it that he's so good at this and we fail so as we do? Please turn to the person next to you. What has life done to us? Talk about it. So what's happened? Learn behaviours. And where do we learn them?
From our parents or from people that we interact with.
Right. So we've always cut cakes. Whenever we go to the cafe, they cut the cake the same way. The birthday cake, we cut the same way. So it's
equal pieces with people.
Exactly. So we make all these assumptions. Yeah, for sure. Good. So what happens?
Sorry?
What happens? Why did we learn it better? All right, great. Okay, folks. So what happens? We talked about, over here, we talked about learned behaviour. When did we cut our first cake? When can you remember cutting your first cake? When you were a kid. 6 years old. Now, I don't know about you, but if I cut a birthday cake for my 3 kids like the top right, there's going to be chaos. My little daughter, Hannah, when we have the birthday party, she runs upstairs and grabs the ruler. You know, she comes down and measures. She's got more than me. So this is learned behaviour. So we've seen it before. We've done it before. It's easy. So we default. Why else? What else happened? What else happened?
We assume there's constraints, and if we don't know what they are, we make them up.
You make up the constraints. So you assume that there is a frame here. And you keep within the frame. Come on, what else was happening to you? Time pressure. You want to kill the creativity of your team, put them under intense time pressure to deliver results. Now, I'm not saying you don't give pressure. You need a bit of pressure. But what you need to do is set aside a bit of time where it's not about come up with one right answer quickly. It's about let's look at this problem from multiple perspectives, generate ideas, share those ideas, and then after we've looked at the problem from different perspectives, then we converge around some sort of approach. Right? So back off the pressure a little bit. Now, what you do have to do, however, is frame the problem. You know, because if you don't frame the problem for people, if you just come into work and say to your team, I want you all to be creative, what's going to happen? They'll be creative, all right. They'll be painting on the walls. They'll be dropping on the floor. No, you've got to frame the problem. Because if you don't frame the problem, then creativity can be chaos. Yeah? Now, there's other situations as well where you don't want creativity with your team. You know, I got invited recently to give a workshop on out-of-the-box thinking in Russia for a company called Rosatom. Do you know what Rosatom does? It's the Russian Atomic Energy Agency. You don't want these people to think outside the box. You know, you keep them in the box, right? So there's also some areas like regulation, safety. Okay, we understand that, but frame it. Frame it, right? That makes sense, right? So we've got time pressure. We've got experience. What else? What else happened to you? Why else did... Come on, Heidi. Why did you draw around... Yeah? Any other reason? You don't even realise. Sorry, what's your name, sir? Nigel, grow up. Nigel's saying it's your fault, Jamie. You made me do it. I did. I preconditioned you, you see. I went like that. Now, so this is also extremely important because if you're leading a team and you walk into the room, all you need to do, because you're in the spotlight, if you're the leader of that group, that team, they look at you and all you need to do is raise an eyebrow. Kills discussion, kills... Some people do this, right? Okay? So this is a big issue. So what we're talking about here actually is the fact that to overcome that tendency of the 2%, that default towards linear, convergent thinking, what we actually have to do is question stuff. You know, don't get me wrong, of course, education is very good. You know, you've studied information systems or whether it's statistics or whatever, operations management. That's great. But you need to also accept that because of the education you've had and the education your colleagues have had, will tend to frame things in a particular way. You've got to question that. Secondly, you've got to question your experience. How many of you have been in your institutional setting where you make a suggestion and one of the faculty guys says, we tried that 2 years ago. It didn't work. Gosh, you know, the pace at which technology is changing, just because something didn't work 3 months ago, it doesn't mean it won't work today. That's the exponential development of digital. Right? So we've got to talk about that one as well. And then the third one, of course, relates to the culture of the institution. And, you know, the institutions I've worked in my life have been some of the most hierarchical, rigid institutions, where the people at the top, remember those people I talked about with the big heads? They think everyone else is a little person. That's not true. Huh? You know, in the old world of higher education, who were we? We were the butlers. We were the people down in the basement who you know, kept the desktop running and provided some... That's not the case anymore, actually, because if we look at what's happening really in terms of innovation in education, we're not the butlers anymore. We can't be the butlers anymore. We actually have to be able to interact with people as equals. As intellectual, maybe we come with different knowledge, but it's no less important than the knowledge they have in their heads. Okay? Now, here's the last exercise I'd like you to do. Now, please do participate. Now, I hope if you haven't got a pencil, you need to stay very still. All right? So I'm going to give you this exercise, which I developed recently. Try it out at an event for Gartner in London. They hated it. Last week in Westminster, they hated it. I'm sure you're going to love it. Okay, so here's the exercise. You ready? What I'm going to ask you to do, and this is not a trick, please take the time. You've got 1 minute. Use all the 1 minute. No photographs. No digital is allowed. This is going to be a hand exercise with pen on paper. As I said, if you don't have a pen, you're going to remain still. You're the model. So this is what I'm going to ask you to do. Please draw the person sitting next to you as accurately as possible. Let's go. Let's go. Draw, draw. Please draw. Now, if you don't have a pen, stay still. Someone else will be drawing you. You might need to turn a little bit. She's drawing you from the side. That's very good. Eh? Please keep drawing. Now, if you finish the face, you can start on the body, but be very careful with that one. Please keep drawing. All right, you got 15 seconds, so you should be finishing the eyebrows, the glasses, the hair, if there is hair. Okay, your time is up. Can you please now show your pictures to the person? Show them to each other. Let's go. Show them around. Show them around. Have a look. Have a look. Great. Okay, now, let me ask you a question. How did you feel when I asked you to do that? Tense, you know, I could see them. I didn't ask you to take your clothes off. I just asked you to draw a picture. People paralyzed. It's funny, isn't it? So, you know, when I go to this exercise, you know, at Gartner last week, there's all these big serious CIO types there, you know, and I went out in the audience and I was saying, come on guys, you can do it, go for it. There was this French guy sitting there, big French guy, you know, and he had his name badge on. He was from a bank. I won't say which bank, but it was a big French bank that had recently acquired a Belgian bank. And one of those guys said, come on, Philippe, you can do it, man, go for it. You know, he looks at me. Do you know what he said? Fuck off. Oh, it's just a picture, man. It's just a picture. What's going on? You know, and then I went up to this other guy. So then there was this other guy there, this German guy. You know, he's sitting there. He's looking very, you know. And I went up to him. I looked at his name badge. I said, come on, Jörg, you can do it. He turned to me. He said, I came to learn, not to have fun. What's happening? Do you remember what we said about, you know, if you want the right culture? You think that guy Pierre has got the right culture in his company? No way, eh? That's big fat ego. And this is part of the problem in academic institutions, isn't it? Because you have people with these huge egos who think that they're smarter than other people. No, they just have different knowledge to other people. They're not open, you know. Small, self-centered little human beings, like I said often. We've got to persuade them. We've got to show them that we're in it together, right? And that's very hard to do. So what we actually have to be able to do is get things done with and through people we don't have delegated authority over. Right? That's how you deal with ego. You've got to be able to frame it in a way that we show it's in their best interests. Because actually, where does ego come from? For this French guy, where was the ego coming from, actually? Fear. Fear. Because ego is essentially the fear to say, I don't know. It's the fear of looking bad, you know. So what's very, very important here is humility. And that's about, again, the culture that we bring in the institution. To be humble. To have the courage to say, I don't know. Now, there's something else going on here. I heard people, when they were drawing, they used a particular word. Even as they were drawing, what did they say? I'm really sorry. Because you think if I draw a picture of, he's not going to like me anymore. And in some cases, for good reason. Do you understand? So this is also about this idea, you know, if you don't have a healthy culture where people can banter and interact with each other and have fun together, you're not going to get a lot of experimentation and risk-taking because we're afraid. Okay, that's important. Now, what's the other way? Have a look at those pictures around you. If I took those pictures out here into the streets of Manchester and said, how old were the people who drew these pictures? What do you think people would say? Have a look at those pictures. What's the average drawing level in this room? Yeah, somewhere between 6 and 8. Why is that? Well, why do most of us not have the drawing ability beyond an 8-year-old?
Because we stopped.
Exactly! We stopped. All right? And that's why I said, I have a talk on YouTube. It's called Creative Parenting. Because, you know, the TED Talk by Ken Robinson, Do Schools Kill Creativity? It's part of the reason we cut the cake we do the way we do, right? We learned how to cut cakes at school. So the problem with, of course, Ken Robinson's talk is he talks about what's wrong with education and he talks about educational reform. What's the problem there for little Georgia? How old is she, 7 now? How old do you think she's going to be by the time that education is reformed to prepare kids for a digital age? How old is she going to be? 73. Too late. It's our job as parents, uncles, aunts, grandparents, and that's what my other talk's about. So you know, this thing actually is a skill thing. And that's why digital is so threatening for people, including many of those professors. Because, you know, the thing about it is you need to be curious. If you want to draw beautifully, what do you need to do? Practice. You need to learn. You need to go back to school. Digital is the same. We and our colleagues need to be curious and be hungry for this lifelong learning, thinking about how we can use this new stuff. We've got to go back to school. And that's, in fact, of course, what events like this are for. Okay? So there's something else here. Just have a quick look at this. We're almost done.
There are many ways to create invention. My way is dive under the water. Too much oxygen, that's very bad for brain. On the other hand, if shortage of oxygen, brain feels it, then brain maximum activity, 0.5 seconds before death. I can suddenly create breakthrough, new idea.
Okay, I think you get the picture. This is Dr. Nakamatsu. He's one of the most productive inventors on the planet. He has about 2,200 patents to his name, which is double that of Edison. Very clever guy, right? Where do you get your ideas for creativity? He gets them in the pool. How about you? Where do they come?
Hanging laundry.
Where?
Hanging laundry.
Hanging laundry. It's repetitive. It's, you clear your mind. Where else do people get their ideas? Playing with kids is brilliant, eh? Walking the dog. Exercising. What's going on here is this is related to neuroscience, right? Because if we have chronic stress, if we are overworked, we essentially are shutting down functions in our brain. The frontal cortex, it's overstimulated. So if you want to bring out creative ideas, you need to slow down. All this discussion right now around mindfulness, that's what it's all about. Slowing down your brain to be more effective with the way you use your brain. Now, how do we do that? Of course, you know, we can do it with exercise. I returned to competitive cycling about 5 years ago. I've had the best ideas of my life in that 5-year period. You know, that's me, racing in a bike. Because what happens when you're racing on a bike, you get a boost of dopamine. It's the same, actually, for running, working out. You know, you get your heart rate up, you get a rush of dopamine. Dopamine is associated with mental alertness and firing of the neurons in the brain. It's a neurotransmitter. The other thing that's interesting is when you exercise, you break down muscle. When you really exercise hard, and that results in the production of what's called human growth hormone. Your body produces this stuff to rebuild your muscles. The latest research on this, that human growth hormone doesn't just go to your legs, arms, it goes to your brain. And it stimulates the production of new brain cells. The view used to be, we're born with a finite number of brain cells, they deteriorate over time, especially after evenings like last night. That's not true. Get the human growth hormone going, you will produce new brain cells. It's good for you. Now, if you don't like exercise, how else do you produce dopamine? How else do you get the stimulant going? Chocolate. Good Belgian chocolate has a chemical called tyrosine. It boosts dopamine. Helps you be creative. Now, what's the other great way to boost dopamine? Sex! Preferably with someone else. You get a big rush of dopamine. It's fantastic. Now, what's the only problem with this? When do most of us have sex? What time of day? In the evenings. It's completely useless. You should be having much more sex during your lunch breaks. Don't let it go to waste, you know. All right, so here's my message. Here's my message. We've been talking a lot about technology, and technology is incredibly important to understand it. But what's more important is the way we think. You know, we have to learn to think about the way we're thinking about stuff, to break out of linearity. What that involves is questioning stuff. Question your education, question your experience, and absolutely question that environment. Do we have the right culture in our institution to allow us to innovate and thrive? And then, of course, the last thing is have a lot of sex. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Thank you.